Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to join us today. We're looking forward to hearing more about your story. And before we discuss all things cybersecurity and kind of get your input on what's going on in the world at this point, um, I was doing some research and it looks like ARC Technologies has been around for 12, 13 years at this point.
Yep, just over a decade.
Yeah, just over a decade. Well, first, congratulations on that. As you know, not a lot of companies make it that far, so that's a great milestone. But tell us why you decided to start your own business, because I know you spent some time in and around the corporate world as well. But why did you decide to start your own business?
Yeah, so that's always been I've definitely been something of I don't quite want to say stubborn, but I'm occasionally a my way or the highway kind of guy. But no,
Okay.
in all seriousness, I kind of floated around the edges of some rather large scale corporate consulting when I was in high school. I was doing some pretty high end cybersecurity stuff. When I started at Auburn, I actually began the firm as let's call it a consumer help desk type deal.
Okay.
Very quickly realized that I much preferred doing business with other businesses, and that other businesses sure as hell paid a lot better.
Sure.
In the end, ARC was intended to be something to get me a little bit of good real world experience while I was in school. My whole family are accountants, so let's just say certain things were kind of planned out a little
Sure.
bit farther in advance than normal. I was supposed to sell the firm, exit when I graduated from my Master's of Accounting at Auburn, and then I was going to go work for one of the big four.
Okay.
Uh, Probably make partner in 15 years, retire 10 years after that. Fairly standard, if slightly aggressive, accounting slash advisory career path.
Yep.
Uh, I ended up having the opportunity to come out to the middle of nowhere, Kansas for a subcontract right after I graduated from undergrad. About 4 years, 3 years after that, two and a half, I bought that company out of their contracts for all of their life sciences customers related to IT and systems and cybersecurity, all of those kinds of things. Went from having about three people reporting to me to nearly 15 in about 12 months. We kind of kept around that number for the last couple of years. And now I'm wanting to put my foot towards the floor a little bit and move the company towards much farther, much more mature direction. So the target is my pie in the sky goal is about $100 million a year in business by the end of 2029. Now, chances of hitting that, who knows? It's one hell of an aggressive goal.
Yeah.
Um, and excuse my French, but I am nothing if not an ambitious bastard. But uh, the construct ideally will be to build one hell of a consulting advisory managed services powerhouse that focuses on a couple of, let's call them, complex industries, some areas where we have expertise, and go from there.
Okay.
Uh, Ideally, hopefully, still playing to that, what I'll call my marketing shtick of being large enough to do it right and small enough to give a damn. We're not the big boys from that level, right? We are going to treat each individual customer as if they are much more important to our bottom line and actually give a damn about what they're doing. So
Yeah.
that's the 10,000 foot view, let's call it.
Okay, I love it, and I love the big hairy goal, right? I mean, $100
Yep.
million dollars. That's fantastic. So, did I hear that right? Like you started, or the firm started at least there in Wichita, right? You're in Wichita,
No, in Auburn actually, where I was at undergrad, basically quite literally in my dorm room.
right? But sorry, you're in Wichita now, and that's
Yes.
where the middle of nowhere, Kansas engagement took you to,
Yep.
right?
Pretty much.
And life sciences is a vertical that you focus on, or you did focus on. Like, tell me more about that.
No,
Is it
we Yeah. So life sciences for us, that's everything from biomedical research to pharmaceutical manufacturing to commercialization operations. So
okay?
everything from some of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world all the way down to small research labs
Okay.
and other outfits. We also do some amount of healthcare, There's some discrete manufacturing, mostly complex stuff. So batteries for cars. We do some more of the fun sides of things, let's call it. Um, and then we also get into a little bit of kind of, let's call it, the financial services. That's the industry vertical. Some of my background is really on the finance, equity side of things. So that's really focused on operating as what's called a platform support entity for private equity type firms, basically, where we come in as a support agent or group at a much more attractive price to the private equity than they could get for our services on the open market. But that's because they're taking us to everybody that fits within their portfolio of companies. Whatever their investment thesis is, if we have alignment with it, that's where that starts to come into play.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So as you're thinking about this growth from where you are to 100 million, maybe more, are there more specifics that you'll dive into around verticals in addition to life science? Because you just laid out a bunch there. Will you try to hone that down or grow all of those?
So my expectation for us is our main focus is going to end up being within life sciences. Healthcare will remain a close secondary. Everything else may be somewhat tertiary. Even when you look at that quote financial services type play where we want to go speak with private equity and venture capital markets, the ideal there is to work with VC, and later stage venture firms or equity firms that are focused on those two verticals.
Okay.
We have some OEM and industry partnerships that kind of drive us towards things like batteries or semiconductors from the discrete manufacturing side. So that's where a lot of the driver for that comes in as well. So I wouldn't call it necessarily a shotgun approach. A lot of this is, believe it or not, there's some things that are applicable across those 5 industries, particularly when you start throwing in the flavor of we want to focus on the venture and private equity side of things that hits those 3 industries, and then have some level of degree of focus on startups. Let's call it a personal passion of mine that we also happen to have some rather unique things from a playbook level, some reference architectures we've designed. The traditional, we're going to go build a company and its infrastructure for you, except the in-game concept for us is I press enter and your startup has everything they need.
Right.
We recently took a small healthcare startup out of Manhattan from nothing to their first office with desktops and devices and all kinds of things in hand in 9 days, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I jokingly tell anybody, if you ever can find another MSP that's actually capable of doing that seriously and having the infrastructure fully deployed, let me know, because I'll buy them.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. No questions asked. Like, you show me that group, I'll show you the checkbook. Let's move on.
Perfect. So, and that's an interesting segue. As you think about the companies that you're working with, whether they're big life sciences companies or startups that are moving into their first office, the topic of cybersecurity, and I know you guys do more than cybersecurity, but that's a buzzword right now, right? I mean,
Yep.
And it has been. What are we doing wrong? Like, what is it that every customer, everybody you come across, I mean, what is it that we need to make sure, like, if you're only going to do one thing, and I know we have to do more than one, right? But what are we doing wrong out there?
So that almost moves us into something of a philosophical debate, but I'll start with this. When you look at much of the branding and the way that we approach the market, while we are an IT consulting and advisory and managed services provider, which means we do a hell of a lot more than just cybersecurity. You want a new ERP? Awesome, we're your guys, right? You want to deploy SASE? Awesome, we love SASE. It makes next-gen firewalls look like a joke. We're your guys, right? If you want to do cloud managed network infrastructure, or basically infrastructure as a service across your org throughout something like Cisco Meraki, cool. We can do that. You want to integrate a $50 million filling line into one of your facilities and do it securely and then validate it on the back end from a 21 CFR level. yeah, we can go do that too, right? So it's very much a one hand to shake methodology, but we call it cybersecurity first for a reason. That's
Okay.
just a lens that we're going to apply and put on it. Just like if you were to go and build a skyscraper, what's one of the first things after you get, you've broken ground? What's one of the first groups of people that gets involved with that entire process is the safety guys, right? Because any large company that's realistically going to be building a skyscraper has something that the last decade and a half has kind of come through and taken over that area by storm of sorts, whether we like it or not. And that's that concept of safety as a culture, right? To me, that's the direction that cybersecurity has to move. It's not one person's responsibility, it's every person's responsibility at the firm. It's not the responsibility of the chief information security officer, it's the responsibility of every employee. It's not something that just the IT guys in the back closet somewhere need to be worried about and thinking about. It's something that everybody needs to have, if not at the forefront of your mind. It's got to be part of the conversation. I mean, hell, even as an individual, right? There were 33 billion-ish accounts that were compromised in the US in 2023.
Jeez.
Everybody needs to be at least thinking about doing some basics here, right? That's why when we dive into this, that construct of cybersecurity as a culture, to me, is where businesses need to start moving. That's your best bet. And yes, can companies only have so many things that are a part of their culture? Sure. But just a little bit like safety as a culture, it doesn't, it's not like it's one of your business priorities forever, right? It's something that everybody then starts to incorporate, right? Once they've seen it enough, it becomes a habit.
Right.
And that's what's important.
Right.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. So
It's a lack of focus everywhere rather than trying to, I can go put in a SASE firewall equivalent, right? I can go put in next generation XDR with backing by the best MDR firm that you could possibly imagine, whoever that happens to be at the drop of the hat, based on the needs of your organization. But those are all tools. It doesn't stop the person at the front desk clicking on the email that gets the entire organization's data encrypted.
right. Right.
So it's yes, it's a training thing. Yes, it's a tool thing. Yes, it's a good practices thing. But in the end, it's about treating it as an important part of the capabilities of the organization and as a target that helps to improve the bottom line eventually, right?
Yeah.
That's the construct. Every company is a technology company today. I don't care if you have 5 people or 500,000. You've all got tech. That means that you're a target. That means that you're at risk. You probably ought to do something about it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And it's interesting because it's to your point, it's a philosophy that is probably then supported by strategies and tactics, as opposed to a strategy or a tactic that without the philosophy is just going to fall short somewhere.
Well, I mean, have you ever had to take a cybersecurity training?
Training, no.
Yeah. About 50% of what's on the market is dull at
Really?
best. Yeah, I mean, it's not engaging content necessarily because it's designed by somebody who thinks cybersecurity is the coolest thing since sliced bread. And hey, I'm one of those guys. There's a flipper on my desk right next to me, right? And I've got a Cato Network SASE unit that I'm playing with in my office. I'm the damn CEO, right? But it's not necessarily engaging. And frankly, most corporate training isn't necessarily the most engaging thing ever, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't improve it. But there's a startup we work with. It's called Ring, right? Their whole focus right now is getting soft skills into schools, right? So high schools, middle schools, that kind of stuff, and they have developed an application that's got some really neat stuff that sits behind it that says, hey, this is about a behavior change agent. Think of it like TikTok, but for learning. So we're going to take this into schools and we're going to teach kids soft skills. We're going to teach them how to shake hands. We're going to teach them how to eat at a business dinner. You know, the implicit things that those of us who have been in the business world for forever know, that, like, you know, let the guy who's paying order the most expensive thing on the menu before you start trying to go do that yourself.
Right.
How do you start a nice conversation with the person next to you without saying, oh, how about this weather? How do you shake a hand? How do you look somebody in the eye when you're doing that, and not, don't limp fish it, right?
Right.
Uh, those kinds of concepts, when we start looking into this training, start looking into this construct of getting cybersecurity more interwoven into the cultures, it's going to have to be a behavior change agent. It's going to have to be something that actually makes it stick. Because the training that's out there right now, yeah, I'm going to go watch my cybersecurity training. Maybe I'll click on the next phishing simulation email. Maybe I won't.
Right.
Maybe I'll miss it.
I'm
Just
doing it
not
because
realize.
HR told me I had to, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
No, that's a good point. So I'm segue a little bit because I want to pick up on something that, or maybe a little undercurrent that I've heard you say. You started in the accounting world, right? You went to Auburn. Maybe it was
I
maybe it was you or
almost have a second degree in accounting, basically.
okay.
But there is a reason for that.
Okay.
Right? Accounting, finance, whichever one you want to frame it as, right? That's your language of business.
Right.
You can be the best technical mind in terms of building a system that you want to be. If you don't understand the business side of it, you are infinitely less useful to me.
Yes. Okay.
Right?
So
You
so
have to
that's
have that understanding.
so that's one of the strings I want to pull at, right? You're now CEO of a cybersecurity company, and you started at Auburn, maybe under the guise of I'm going to go be an accountant somewhere, and somewhere along the way that
I
diverged.
actually started in architecture, among
Oh, okay.
many
Well,
other odd things about
yeah.
my life. I transferred into information systems, basically a minor in accounting, get enough credits to go do my master's in accounting, and I would have stuck on the IT advisory side. But even then, that concept of I've got to be able to understand both sides of the business, to understand why I'm doing the IT things and how they actually might be useful in either making the business money or reducing cost, or even just good basic business operations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually give 2 scholarships at Auburn specifically designed to get people to try to, let's call it, cross pollinate between those 2 majors, because it's an important concept.
Yeah.
Right? You've got to be, as an IT person, you need to be able to understand the business. As an accountant or as a finance person, you ought to really be able to understand how or why these systems are doing what they're doing in the background. And it's not just because some guy in a room somewhere decided to write some C# to say that was what it was going to do.
Yeah.
Reason behind all this stuff, and you become a lot more effective if you understand those pieces. Maybe that's just my 2 cents.
No, I agree. So now that you've been CEO of a growing company, and you've got, I mean, you had a company when you were in college and it was doing help desk things, as you mentioned, right? But this is like real world stuff now at a very high scale. What is it? What's the most significant learning that you've had as CEO? Like you didn't realize maybe until, it's been a while, right?
Oh boy.
What is it
That's
that your scholarship recipients, you tell them, hey, you're not going to believe me now, but someday when you own your own company, you're gonna figure this out on your own, right? What is that?
oh that's an interesting one, and it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with anything that I've been talking about up till this point. See,
Probably not.
I'm definitely what one might consider to be a perfectionist,
Okay.
right? I there's you've heard the phrase, there's 10 different ways to skin a cat. Now, to me, there may be 10 different ways to do it, and in IT there might be 100 different ways to do something. There's only one most efficient, most effective, most cogent way to go about solving a problem. Even if you've got a bunch of different options, there's still going to be one best way.
Okay.
Here's the really interesting thing about running a company, and this is something that I am still learning to do. You kind of have to throw that out the window a little bit, because your best way isn't necessarily your employee's best way. And at some point, you've got to learn how to delegate, damn it. Now, I happen to still be terrible at this.
Okay.
But it's one of those things that you're going to have to be okay with figuring out how to trust somebody else, how to go deliver on what you believe to be the strategy, what you think is the direction of the company. You've got to learn to be able to take a little bit of feedback with that, right? It's not everybody's going to agree all of the time, and that's okay. Sit down, have a rational conversation about it, and say, you know what? You're closer to this than I am. Go run with it.
Hmm.
I may or may not necessarily agree with you 100%, but we've gotten close enough to an agreement here. Go run with this. Go be my fire and forget missile at something. That's
Yeah.
a really difficult thing to do for people to scale. And I've fallen into that trap of not letting people do that enough times to know that, generally speaking, you're better off if you do. It's a hard skill to learn, and I'm still learning to be comfortable with delegating, but it's a really common thing for the big boys in business for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It's not like Bezos does every single little thing for Amazon that needs doing.
Right. Right.
As a CEO, your job is to be the shit catcher.
Hmm.
You're
Sure.
gonna go. The only thing you should see are the biggest, worst, nastiest problems your company has.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Don't go. Don't fall into the trap of looking at the fun stuff.
Right.
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 Go deal with the problems. That's what your job is.
And how do you check yourself with that situation in which it should probably be delegated, but you're on your way to go do it, right? Like how do you, oh, maybe I should have somebody else go do this.
Oh, if I ever figure that out all the way, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
uh,
Hindsight's 2020,
yeah,
right?
hindsight's definitely 2020. The interesting thing about that one, I would say, is hire some people who are going to tell you, hey, step off. I've got
Hmm.
this.
Okay.
Because in the end, particularly if you're like me, it's really hard to turn my brain off. And I like to go from A to Z really, really, really quickly. I'm not necessarily leaping in logic. It's just I've gone A, B, C, D so fast you can't really follow it sometimes.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
okay. Throws people for a loop sometimes, but in the end, I may be already trying to solve a problem that somebody else is also trying to solve. That doesn't work so well either,
Yeah.
right? That whole everybody's got their different way of skinning the cat methodology. Okay. You can't just throw in two people at the same resource when either one of them can effectively solve it is a really poor use of time, particularly as a growing company. So figuring out and empowering your team and saying, hey, yeah, tell me to step off when I'm a little too close to the action.
Yeah.
That's your best case scenario, at least for me so far.
And so you have team members that are willing to do that now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That
And how
I
how
I
did
would
you
argue that I have hired a team full of guys who not a single one of them has any problem telling me that you know maybe it's time to back off a little bit.
yeah.
Um, some of the younger ones probably less so, but particularly the exec folks, yeah, that's a. I don't think I've got a single person at the company who has any problem giving me crap, if nothing else. Which
So that's
be
interesting.
worse.
How did you Jason, how did you create and or foster that type of an environment where it's okay to give the boss crap, right? To tell the boss to step off.
Um, it certainly wasn't necessarily an intentional thing.
Okay.
Hopefully, it's just something that the team picked up on. We're still small enough that it's you're kind of building the culture as you go a little bit. Um, and I've never necessarily been an intentional culture person, right? Um, I can definitely fall onto the side of the culture wheel of, you know, it's my company, my risk, my capital, and the culture shall be what I say it shall be. Thankfully, in not necessarily pushing too deeply into that side of things, there's been some things that have naturally grown out of how we interact with each other on a daily basis, and that's been one of them. I don't know that it was a necessarily an intentional one, but I'm a triplet.
Oh,
Talking shit was part of growing up.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it
Okay.
comes as naturally as breathing. So Hey, as
Yeah.
long as we're not doing it in front of the customer, fine by me. Unless the customer wants to join in which case I can't do anything to stop them. And sometimes I have had some of the most entertaining conversations of my life just with that kind of stuff. So
Interesting. Interesting.
works.
Okay. So with that being said, what's the what have you learned about yourself along this way, along this journey of becoming a CEO, growing a company, scaling a company, having employees, having to kind of check your own tendencies at the door for the sake of the staff and the organization? I mean, and it's interesting, you were a triplet. My wife's a twin, not a triplet, but a twin. So there's a whole different dynamic there, right? Which is interesting, that plays into your
Trust me.
persona. Yeah. Yeah. It plays into your persona, right? My wife's like, I've shared everything my whole life, right? Like, so, but what have you learned about yourself along the way?
Oh boy. I am definitely a very, very different person than I was even 7 years ago. Right. And particularly in learning to deal with people. Now, this particular methodology is a little outdated, and I forget exactly what it was replaced, I believe, by DISC. So I forget exactly what the construct in DISC is called, but personality wise, I'm what's called a driver driver.
Okay.
All right. So uh, I'm here to do a job. We're going to get this done. We're going to do it right now. There's no time for breaks, and hell, I don't know what a vacation is.
Right.
Um, that is not how most people work,
Uh-huh.
right? Shockingly, that's not how the world operates.
Yeah.
Uh, so learning how to, gosh, and this makes me look terrible, but it's a damn good example. And it was just something that I had to learn, and I'm glad I've learned at least well enough to kind of sort of start moving past it. One of my when I first actually hired people properly, right? First time that I wasn't using a 1099, like actual W-2, and they're like, "Hey," one of the guys came to me and says, "Hey, I need tomorrow off." Uh, I'm like, "Got work to do. What's the deal?" Basically, and he's like, "Oh, my girlfriend's kid has this and that, and I need to help take them to the appointment, I believe it was." And in the back of my brain, I'm like, "Why the? Okay, sure. Yeah, why do you need to be doing this again? You're making good money here. Like,
Right.
it's just not the way my brain works." And took a step back and said, "Okay, sure, right. Take your time off. See you when you get back, kind of
Sure.
thing. You'll be here the next day." And that was after that kind of conversation, replaying it in my head. I went, "Wow, that is not something I would have done 6 weeks ago."
Interesting.
Right. Um, it hiring people put some things in rather unique perspective for me, because where when you got a bunch of consultants, contractors working for you that are 1099s, they're on for a project, off for the next project, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They're resources. It's different when they're your employees, right?
Mhm.
Your My responsibility as the CEO is make sure the business continues, and business continues means that those guys have enough money to put food on the family for their tables, on the tables for their families. Excuse me. That
Sure.
that changes the game a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I jokingly tell people when we hire them, it's like, this isn't Kansas anymore. It's no longer playtime, because there's facilities that I can walk you into where on the other side of some wire cages are barrels full of fentanyl
Hmm.
concentrate. Put your finger in that. That's it, right? This isn't time to play around anymore. We're
Yeah.
we're we're here to do some serious stuff. That doesn't mean we can't at least learn to be a little bit human about it, and understand that, yeah, these are actual people I have working for me. They're not numbers. They're not any of those things that you occasionally hear, particularly at larger companies, as being the reason why a lot of people might leave. But that really, really, really changed the game. So learning how to be, let's call it, a little bit more human is definitely one of the most interesting things that I would never have expected learning.
Yeah, that is. And is that a constant or continued struggle for you, or have you pretty much got your arms around it?
Oh no, I definitely still I'm way too much of a driver for it probably to ever go away.
Yeah,
Um, but I'm definitely a lot better about it now. Like it's not necessarily a um, it's not nearly so much a problem as it was.
good.
Right? I've definitely learned at least a little bit my way around being a little bit more human, particularly with my own team. But sometimes that in the consulting world, that's got to extend to customers too,
Yeah,
right? You've got a big project deadline and you need this one person, and now that one person is sick for 2 days. Well, congratulations. That's probably going to affect my bottom line. And
hmm,
I'm just going to have to get over it
yeah,
because they've got something going on with their family or a doctor's appointment or they're just home sick as a dog. Shit happens. Move on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so that brings up another interesting question. Given your industry and the types of consultants that I'm presuming work for you, they're in very high demand. Are you finding that the hiring market is presenting a challenge for your firm, or how's that playing out?
Um, it's a rather interesting mix. So we also have a staffing capability on top of everything else that we do.
Okay.
Uh, that is a bit unique. Um, I've had customers with jobs that they've been trying to hire for 700 plus days, and we found candidates in 9 days.
Okay.
Um, like I said, we have some unique capabilities where that is concerned that let us find unicorns to some degree, frankly. Um, so it's not necessarily one that we've struggled with, but I've also generically, particularly early on in some of our growth, the first couple of years of really taking this and it being my own thing, and actually hiring people I was focused on hiring young talent that was coachable rather than going out and sniping industry veterans or people who've got 25 years of experience because in the end I don't want bad habits. I want to only teach you the good ones as best as I can.
Okay.
So yes, it's always hard to find good people.
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend not rushing the recruitment process as much as you possibly can as a small business, right? I mean, it's people will either take your business to obnoxious heights or they'll kill it. And sometimes
Okay.
as a small business, there may not be any in between. You've got to make sure you get everybody rowing in that same direction because
Yeah.
frankly, if you're not going to row in the same direction where we're going as an entity, I'd rather you not be a part of the entity
Hmm.
because it's going to be a lot worse if we're all rowing this way and you're back here doing this.
Right.
We're going to move a hell of a lot faster if you weren't rowing at all.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Put you in somebody else's boat. It's fine.
Basically, yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah. You guys, is that you prescribe to that tenant?
Try to.
Good.
I've definitely gotten myself in trouble with it a couple of times. Kind of that learning thing.
Sure.
That was one of the very. I expect I would have been able to build and grow much faster if I'd been in industry and been a manager somewhere and been a partner somewhere for 5 or 10 years before I went out and started my thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, I made plenty of mistakes, probably more than average to actually be able to survive as a business. But in the end, I hopefully learned at least some of them. And ideally, I won't have to learn any of those lessons more than once.
Right. And is that thought just simply from the experience that you would have gained around people and managing and hiring and dealing with employees? Is that what you're talking about there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably more so than anything else, right? The technical expertise, I like to read. I learn quickly, and the team consistently gives me crap about my mind being a steel trap, so to speak. I'll recall a conversation from 6 months ago, and they'll kind of just look at me like, yeah, we didn't say that. It's like, well, I can go find it on Teams if you'd like.
You're like, oh, but you did. Yes. Yeah.
We definitely did.
Right. Hey, I
But
love
that was,
the people. Like, I want my team with those kinds of people who's like, oh, I did? Okay, yeah, let's do that then. If I said that,
yeah,
let's go. Right?
yep.
Yeah.
But it's hard to find, and that one particular skill of mine will definitely, probably more than anything else, has the ability to rub people the wrong way so quickly it's not even funny.
Yeah, it does. It does. So
But
what is the biggest obstacle then that's facing the firm right now?
I'd say that's probably a bit twofold. The first is also partially because I didn't spend 20 years in industry first, right? I've got a pretty darn strong network for a 29-year-old, but it's not the same as somebody who's been in the same industry for 25 years,
Right.
right? So to some degree, getting the word out at scale where it's effective is certainly a problem, right? Bringing customers in the front door is a problem for every business,
Mhm.
but for someone who spent, for some of our customers, what we did for them, we didn't talk about, and we still don't talk about who our customers are,
Yeah.
right? You can't go to my website and see a list of my marquee clients.
Right.
We don't do that. We never will do that. It's just not how it works. I had a company that we were going to do some advisory work for that reached back out after receiving our proposal and said, hey, can you send us your top 3 references? Like, one, I don't believe in references because there's not a consulting or advisory or any kind of services firm out there in the world who isn't going to send you to their top 3 customers who love them and will sing their praises. So it's an
Right.
exercise in confirmation bias.
Sure.
But 2, we call ourselves cybersecurity first. Part of being cyber first is not disclosing information about our customers. Some people might think that's paranoid. I will tell you some of the stuff that I have seen from that level would boggle the mind and probably make you not sleep very well at night.
Yeah.
It's not a joke. There's a reason for it, and we will continue to maintain it. I can talk about, we did this type of thing for a tier 1 top 10 pharmaceutical, or got a healthcare startup rolling their first office in 9 days, but you're never going to hear us talk about who our customers are specifically. And
Yeah.
there's good reasoning behind that. You can either agree with that reasoning and decide to, quote, take a chance on me, that you probably would anyways if you got 3 glowing recommendations, which I can assure you're going to get because we're just going to send you to the top 3, right?
Right.
That's all anybody ever does.
Yep.
It's not like I send you to customers who are pissed at me,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right.
I wish we could, right? I want to hear the good and the bad. For some reason we ever started doing that, I'd probably want to say, here's my 3, and here's the ones that are
Right.
going to call me the devil incarnate.
Right. Right.
Right. Let me give you the full deal, because in the end, you will have customers that hate you and you will have customers that love you. It's not anything you can do about it.
Yeah.
So
True. True.
maybe a roundabout way of answering that question.
No,
But
that's
there we
that's
go.
fair. That's fair. A couple more questions. If you were going to roll back the clock and start over, would you do anything differently? And if so, what?
Oh, yeah. Anybody who doesn't say yes to that question needs to get some things re-examined.
Yeah.
Um,
Give us a couple things that you would do differently.
boy, scale faster.
Okay. People,
I
customers, revenue, what would you,
all of it.
geography, all of
But
it.
customer being number 1,
Okay.
right? Never get yourself into the comfortable position of having too few customers.
Okay.
Like, yeah, you can have customers that cash flow you great money, and that's an awesome thing, but scale your customers. That's always a never be too reliant on one particular portion of a business. I think I would scale people definitely second, but that tends to come along with scaling the customer. But forcing myself to step back and focus on the scaling would be one of the bigger things, right? I love doing technical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good at it. That's why I do what I do, right? That's the I want to go be boots on the ground when we're integrating a, you know, $20 million piece of filling equipment and watch it put drugs in and make the PLCs connect to the network and start collecting data from them and
Right.
do all kinds of fancy securitization things and go deploy network switches and it's fun. I love doing that stuff. I'm so much less valuable to the business out on a plant floor somewhere integrating a piece of equipment than I am in front of the customer. Right. So forcing myself to step out and have a clear goal of scaling rather than just continuing to service the customers I have. I needed to learn sooner how to recreate myself in aggregate, go push that to a customer and focus on building the business. We'd be a hell of a lot further along if I'd started on that process earlier. I think the other one would have been somehow learning to delegate faster. And yeah, that comes with part of that, but that's got to be a big one. And listening a little bit better when people would tell me, you know, oh, there's this human component to managing a team.
Yeah.
And actually ingesting some of that stuff rather than learning it the hard way would be pretty ideal. Those probably be my top three.
Okay, those are good.
That
and
not selling the couple hundred coins of Bitcoin I had back in 2012. You know,
like we said,
$70 million down the drain.
Hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's great because I think all of those are very intertwined, right? I mean, they all kind of go together. So my last question, because I've heard you say a couple of things about this. You talked about the 2029 revenue goal. You've talked a couple of different times about scale and from your vantage point, the importance of scaling. For you and the firm, what are you trying to accomplish? What does all the scale mean to you? Is it you're trying, because you just said you said earlier we may never be the biggest, we may never be, you know, this big global brand, but you're obviously working towards something and it's big, right? What are you hoping to accomplish with what you're building?
Couple of things. And this is kind of a point that we've begun to solidify in, you know, as we start really truly developing mission, vision, values, and all that kind of stuff. But there are certain things about, and this is probably most applicable to managed services, but it's true in consulting and it's true in advisory. I have a certain minimum standard sometimes for certain things, whether it's service delivery or the quality of the product that gets returned to the customer, actually doing it the right way the first time rather than bumbling around and kind of just learning as you go, right? It's a little bit that concept of RTFM, read the manual. I can't tell you how many times where we've outperformed a larger, bigger, badder firm than us or beat out an expert on something because I made somebody sit down and read the damn manual. Because nobody else had done that. And oh, hey, wouldn't you know, the solution to our problem was right there.
Right.
But that driving at I kind of want to pull the industry along with us a little bit.
Okay.
I'd like to be build so much of a, this is the minimum standard for how you're going to go about this, that everybody else, whether big or small, has no choice but to come along with us, right? Is that crazier and more pie in the sky than $100 million a year in 5 years? Probably. But we're going to give it one hell of a shot.
Yeah, who's to say, right?
So let's actually get out there and make enough of a lasting impression that we bring what's around us back up to what I'd consider par, right? How many times have you talked to somebody who's gone out to one of the big firms and, with the exception of the guy who hired them, gone, oh, wow, that was a fantastic experience. They solved every problem I had and I didn't get 15 change orders.
Yeah.
It tends to be the exact opposite of that. And that's a problem, not only because it harms the industry as a whole, but because, you know, I got so intent on putting in XYZ solution that we put something that was a paper process, picked it up, put it on glass, so to speak, right? It's the industry digital transformation way of phrasing that. And we didn't look at the process and we didn't look at the people. So we have the same inefficient garbage that we happen to use a pen and write on paper, and now it's in a digital system. And suddenly everybody wonders why the hell we aren't seeing the value out of digital transformation that we all thought we could have.
Right. Right.
Probably because you didn't quite follow the best practice quite all the way.
Yeah.
You just got big-eyed about the neat, cool, badass system that you found and decided you wanted to implement that without really thinking about the rest of it. I get it. I'm a technologist. I love the cool shit, but you got to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
Right? That's, again, harkening back to the understanding the accounting side, understanding business as well as understanding the technology. If you're
Right.
just going to focus on the thing you're good at, the thing you know, yeah, okay, you're useful to me to a degree, to a certain extent. I can make you a SME on something in a week. I promise you. Won't necessarily be pleasant, but I'll kind of get you there.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have somebody who's a jack of all trades and master of none, right? Better than a master of one. That's the whole phrase there, for those of
Right.
you who haven't heard it.
Right.
And particularly as a consultant, you kind of have to be that. You've got to be able to scale up your knowledge on things really, really quickly. But, I have the unique ability to just kind of, if I see a system once, I've kind of got it kind of thing, right? And not everybody's going to be able to replicate that, but you've got to figure out, if you're really good at teasing apart process workflows, or you're really good at figuring out how people think and how they will react, right? In a digital transformation scenario, we need to understand how somebody's going to react to getting a paper process taken away from them and going to a digital process.
Right.
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 You get some really weird stuff. I built basically an order processing system while I was still in school, and got a call from the owner of the business. Like, it was a couple of months after we'd finished, and they're like, "Well, nothing's changed." It's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, orders still take the same amount of time. We've still got the same miss rate. We've still got the same amount of errors in processing and customers who are pissed off." I was like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense, because we did look at the process and we changed it a little bit." He's like, "Well, okay, some things have gotten a little better." It's like, "Yeah, but a little better doesn't make sense either. So let me
Right.
come back. I'll do my guarantee on the work. Let me come back and watch and see what's gone wrong." Well, it turns out the folks in the back office didn't really like the fact that they now had to use their keyboards rather than their pens. And they were taking screenshots of my digital system, hitting Control P for all intents and purposes, and still processing paper orders.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Right.
Lesson learned there. I didn't train them well enough on the system.
Right.
I didn't convince them as to why this was a better process. I put in a really great technical solution, but I failed to sell it.
Yeah.
So therefore, they didn't use it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That's great. That's awesome. Well, Jason, this has been great. I know that because of what you do, and you've told us this before, we're not going to know who you work with. We've got a kind of an idea of the broad range of services that you provide under this or through this cybersecurity lens. But if somebody listening wants to get in touch with you and your firm, or they have a project that they'd like to talk with you about, how can we do that?
Well, everybody on the C-suite should be on LinkedIn. They should be very active on LinkedIn. I believe all of us have booking links on our LinkedIn pages. So if you need to chat, that's a very easy way to get a hold of us.
Okay.
That should always plug directly into our calendars. You're always free to fill out any forms on the website. So if you already know who you are and you see a Google ad, please don't make me pay for the click. But you're always free to email me. All my contact information from the corporate level is, and same for most of my team, is always available on LinkedIn. You can find it just by clicking on the contact me type stuff.
Okay.
My business cell will pop up. My email will pop up. You can always go to our website, architectgroup.com. And anytime you have those kinds of questions or want to reach out, that's always go book some time. Maybe let me know why you're booking it, so I'm not coming into the conversation blind. We like to do our homework around here, but we should be very easily accessible at this
Okay.
point.
Okay. So website, there's some contact forms on the website.
Yep.
Everybody's on LinkedIn. I know your
Yep.
information's out there on LinkedIn. Those are the two best ways. And
Yep. There should be booking links built right into things. You can just click right on that and have at it.
perfect. Perfect. Well, Jason, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're all going to be watching as you transcend towards that $100 million mark.
Be the plan. Thanks for this, Chris. It's
All
been
right,
great.
sir. Thank you.